So we're at an interesting point in Israel and Judah's history. And just as a reminder, probably more for people at home, Israel's in the north, Judah is in the south. We had two major prophets that ministered primarily in the north, Elijah and Elisha. They're both dead. The house of Jehu is reigning in Israel, and you'll see that on the left side here. Jehu is the first king here on the left, and just kind of giving you some of the dates if you don't need to mark this. And by the way, if anyone wants a chart of all these dates, just send me a message, an email. Send me an email. I will send it over to you and get you that. But anyway, the house of Jehu is ruling in Israel, but in the south, down in Judah, which are the kings on the right side, things aren't going so well. We've just looked at Amaziah. He's the fourth king down. We looked at Amaziah a few weeks ago, and he went to war against Israel, and he got whooped. He got whooped. And the king of Israel warned him not to fight against him, but he fought anyway in pride, and Israel comes down and invades Jerusalem, and they conquer the capital city, and they take the king of Judah as a prisoner of war, and it's kind of like a mini exile. And so at this point, Israel in the north seems to be like an extremely powerful nation. They don't have to contend with Syria because let's see here. Let me open up. I want to open up the right map here. The kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Man, where are they? I should have had it up. My mistake. Well, we'll just go with the unified kingdom because I can't seem to find the map I want. That's a shame. That's a shame. Maybe this would be better. This is a little better. I can't find the map I want for some reason. But basically you have a kingdom in the north which kind of consists of this land and then Judah down here in the south. So what's going on here is the northern kingdom of Israel, they're dealing primarily with their neighbor to the northeast, which is Syria. But Syria is not that big of a problem right now because the Assyrians, who are up here, the Assyrians kind of came in and they've been fighting with the Syrians. And so Israel doesn't have to contend with those guys. Israel doesn't have to contend with Judah so much because they just handed Judah a major defeat and put them to like a mini exile. So right now, the northern kingdom of Israel, they're kind of like the big dog right now. They're kind of like a little bit of a superpower in the area. I would say they are a big fish in a small pond. That's how I would talk about Israel at this point. They're a big fish. We all know a little bit of what that's like to be a big fish in a small pond. Because I remember for us we had our sixth grade. Everybody was in the same class in sixth grade. And you were like a big fish, a real big fish in a little pond. And then in seventh grade, we're in junior high, and you're a little fish again. And then in eighth grade, we were a big fish again. And then we were a real small fish when we went into high school. And we climbed our way up the food chain until we were like seniors. And as seniors, you were the big fish in a small pond. And then you went off to either college, or you went off to work in some company, or maybe you ended up staying a big fish in a small company or whatever. But for me, I went off to college, and I was a nobody. And that story just kept kind of reproducing itself. So I was in my senior year in high school, I was a big fish in a small pond, and then I was a little fish in a bigger lake. I was a minnow the next year. Who's experienced something like that? I think most of us at some level experience something similar to that. Well, Israel is a big fish in a small pond right now, but there's a much bigger lake of nations out there. And, they need to be careful or else they're gonna fall, and they will fall. But anyway, where we are right now is that Jeroboam is the ruler of Israel, and we'll see him. I've got him highlighted here in yellow. Let's take a look at the beginning and length of his reign, and we're just really only looking at a few verses today. 2 Kings 14:23. In the 15th year of Amaziah, so pay attention to this, it's the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah. I'm going to try to draw on this, and I'm going to get it all messed up, but I'm going to do it anyway. In the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Judah, the 15th year, the first year being 796, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, or Jehoash over on the left side, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria, and he reigned 41 years. Now, I don't want you to get this confused with the other Jeroboam. Remember we talked this morning about, how would you like to be named Adolf? You don't want to be named after Adolf Hitler. You don't want to be named after Saddam Hussein, like you wouldn't want the name Barack Hussein Obama or something like that, right? So we wouldn't want to be named after some kind of bad dudes in history. Well, Jeroboam is. You don't want to get him confused with the first king of Israel. Remember, you have Saul. He's the first king of the United Nation, then the United Nation of Israel. You have Saul, then you have David, then you have Solomon, then the kingdom divides. And in the north, that's Israel, Jeroboam is its first king, right around 931, 930 range. And he goes till about 910. So he's been dead for over 150 years, or around 150 years or so. This Jeroboam II, I have him on our chart as Jeroboam II. This Jeroboam, again, is named after that Jeroboam, and that tells me that his father, Jehoash, remember there were two Jehoashes, and they ruled at the same time at moments, Joash or Jehoash. That tells me that his father, what's it tell me that Jehoash would name his son after Jeroboam? What do we remember about Jeroboam, the first Jeroboam? What do we remember about this guy? Good guy or bad guy? Bad. Why is he a bad guy? Caused Israel to sin in idolatry by, he set up his own priesthood. He set up the golden calves at Dan and Bethel, these two false places of worship to keep the people from going down to Jerusalem. This is not a good guy. So, Jehoash, what does it tell me about Jehoash that he's naming his kid after Jeroboam? There's only two possible options. Either one, he's kind of ignorant. Well, I guess there's three. Either he's ignorant of history, he doesn't care, or, he doesn't really seem to have a big problem with Jeroboam and his whole cultic system. And it would be like naming your kid after George Washington or something like that, except, Jeroboam and George Washington are, I don't know about you, but I got taught that George Washington never told a lie. Did anyone get taught that? What ridiculous, right? And who believed it too? I believed it. Who believed that George Washington never told a lie? Because he cut down his mother's cherry tree, right? And then he told her the truth about it. Is that how the story goes? George Washington never told a lie. Who thinks he never told a lie here? I don't think so. I don't think he was. Nope. I'm sure he told a lie at some point in his life. But anyway, it could just be he looks up to Jeroboam as the first king. Whatever the case is, I'm not trying to name my kid after an idolatrous king of Israel. That kind of shows you a little bit where these guys are. Now, if we're looking at the dynasty of Jehu, So we're kind of coming back here and we're looking at the dynasty of Jehu. Jehu was promised 4 sons to sit on the throne. We're in the third of those 4 sons. Now here's where the tricky part gets. How do I erase this? That button? See, I never do it right. I never know. Someone's going to have to teach me how to do that the right way, because, PowerPoint is whatever. Anyone know how to do that the right way? No one knows how to do it the right way. I feel like you did it the right way one time. You did it on accident? Oh, I thought, okay. So we go back to 2 Kings 10. However, as for the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin, from these Jehu did not depart, even the golden calves that were at Bethel and that were at Dan, and that's up in the northern part and the southern part of Israel. The Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in executing what is right in my eyes, because you remember he wiped out the Baal worshippers, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the 4th generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. So he had wiped out the Baal cult at that point in time. He still clung to the sins of Jeroboam, Dan and Bethel. But now Jehu's dynasty is nearing an end. Now, one thing that, remember we talked about this? We talked about the 15th year of Amaziah. Now let's come back, and I'm going to draw again, and I'm going to have to escape again and mess the whole thing up, but that's okay. It's the 15th, in the 15th year of Amaziah, Jeroboam begins his rule. This is the first year of Amaziah. And this is when Jeroboam begins his rule. 796 to 793. How many years does that look like to you? Does that look like 15 years? That doesn't look like 15 years to me. It looks like the 4th year is what it looks like to me. But again, we've done this before, haven't we? So if some liberal or some reporter for CNN comes up to you and says to you, look, there's a contradiction here in one of these things, although the timeline is not exactly in the Bible, the timeline is based on the Bible. What are we going to say? Some liberal says, oh, you got a problem here with your math. What are we going to say? The first thing we're going to say is, first off, our math doesn't have to be right. Our math doesn't have to be perfect. God's word is true, but my math isn't always right. But what's the next thing we'd say? So what Joe did was he looked at Jehoash's reign and saw that Jehoash reigns until 782. So the 15th year, 796 minus 15, and then you add a year back in, that would be 781. But if you're counting the first year, you're adding that year back in, you're at 782. You're at 782. So in the 15th year of Amaziah, Jeroboam begins his reign. So in this passage, the writer is counting 782, the time of his sole rule, as the beginning of his reign. So he's not really counting the co-regency in that verse. What's interesting is that he kind of changes the. Check this out. So man, I wish I knew how to do this the right way, but I'm just going to do it the way I know how to do it. What's interesting is, at the end of the verse, he reigns 41 years. So if we come back to our man-made timeline based on our scriptural account, we see that if you count from 782, it's not 41 years. It's less than 30 years, really. What is that? 782, 772, 762, 752. It's less than 30 years. It's 29 years. So in the first part of the verse, he's counting from 782. In the second part of the verse, he's counting from when Jeroboam actually begins his co-regency, the full 41-year length of his rule. So they're not committed to time in the same way that we are. Like listen, he begins his rule here, In other words, you could read it like this. If we were translating this the way we would, and if we're doing it word for word, this is how we do it. What's read is right. But if we're explaining it in the way we look at things today, we would say, in the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria. He began his sole rule. But he reigned in his entirety for 41 years, including the co-regency. That's how we would say it. That's how we would say something like that. Does that make sense? You may not think that's that important, but let me tell you, those timelines really help us kind of figure out what's going on in context. So it is something. It's something to kind of figure out. But if we come back to our timeline, that means he rules. He rules for 41 years. He rules until 753. Now, does anyone know when the northern kingdom of Israel falls? It's on there. I know, kind of, but you'd have to know. You wouldn't just know by looking at the thing. Now you would. 722. 722. So do the math on that. How many decades are left? It's like 30. There's like 30 years left. We're really winding down to the very end of the kingdom of Israel. In 30 years, Samaria will fall. And we're in the last decades of this, and they're going to fall because of rampant idolatry. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. And Jeroboam's 41-year reign is the longest of any reign of any king in the northern kingdom of Israel. Israel lasts for 209 years. If you count, say, 930 down to 722 or 931, depending on how you're counting it, 209, 208 years, something like that. 41 out of those, a little over 200 years, are ruled by one guy. And things are so bad during his rule, nearly 20% of Israel's nation is ruled by one, the time of Israel as a nation is ruled by one king. And things follow a path to the point where you can't reverse the situation. It's irreversible. And Israel gets to the point of no return. Kind of like what happens during the reign of Manasseh in the south, the 55-year reign of terror of Manasseh in the south. So I've kind of given my cards away and told you that his rule was evil. And we see that in verse 24. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. So he's named after Jeroboam, and he lives up to his name. He does what Jeroboam does. He advances the cult of Jeroboam and its false priesthood for 180 years nearly. For nearly 180 years by the end of his reign. This nation has been devoted to cult worship, to worshiping false versions of the Lord, and soon it will pay for its idolatry. Now, you've heard of the prophet Hosea, right? Anyone? Bible trivia for 600. The name of Hosea's prostitute of a wife. This is probably not 600. I've said this name far too many times. It's probably more like 2, but I saw this hand first, so I'm going to go with Brittany. It is Gomer. Is that what you're going to say? So I overrated that one. I overrated that. We've talked about it too much. No. I have said it a few times. So Hosea is a prophet who spoke about this king's, Jeroboam II's, evil rule, about his time. And another prophet who spoke against the evil society that existed during Jeroboam's rule is Amos. Amos, whose job was for, I think 600. I think 600's fair. Whose job was, Abby?
Was he like a fig tree farmer or something?
Oh, wait, did you say a fake tree? Oh, fig tree farmer? What's that?
He was a herder.
Herdsman.
And he was also a sycamore farmer.
Okay, we'll take that. I was looking for a goat herder. I was looking for a herdsman, but yeah, okay, good. What's that? And good chocolate chip cookies. Yes, correct. Yes, correct. So this guy's rule is long, Jeroboam's rule is long and evil. And these people they're not coming back to the Lord. So we're seeing the length of his rule, we're seeing the evil of his rule, we're seeing some of the works of his rule. I mean, listen, even though the rule was long and evil, some good things happened. Politically speaking, as a nation, he restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath as far as the Sea of the Arabah. And we're going to talk about that in a second. According to the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, which he spoke through his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was of Gath-hepher. We'll talk about that in a second too. For the Lord saw the affliction of Israel, which was very bitter, for there was neither bond nor free, nor was there any helper for Israel. The Lord did not say that he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So even though it's an evil time, the kingdom is kind of advanced temporarily from a political perspective. Which reminds me of where we are at this exact moment in America a little bit, if you can kind of figure out the parallel to that. Like, we're in a moment where it seems like we're going to be advanced a little bit. We've made some better decisions. In this last election, the nation kind of made a better decision, but we kind of know where the nation is heading and where it probably ends up. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. So Jeroboam, during Jeroboam's reign, if we're coming back to the timeline, during Jeroboam's reign, about 10 years in, right before he begins his sole rule, right before Jehoash, before he passes off the scene, Assyria comes in and they attack Syria, and Syria's weakened, and Israel then kind of gains freedom because they don't have enemies to deal with. And Jeroboam inherits this kind of like this time of peace where he doesn't have to worry about like the kings around him looking over his shoulder or trying to control him. So everybody around him is extremely weak at this point in history. And like I said, Israel at this point is a big fish in a really small pond. But during that time, Jeroboam starts to restore the land that Israel had previously lost. And we see that in verse 25, where he restores the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath as far as the Sea of the Arabah. Now, Hamath is way up north. And I have a slide here, and this may not help, but you know what, I'm going to go ahead and draw on this again and mess it up again, but Israel's typical borders were something like this in the north. And sometimes they get some of the land out here in the land of Gilead. That's my best. That's actually not terrible. That's actually pretty good. That's some of my best work. And just to show you, this is male, right? And female as a dress, and that's female. Something like that. That's my work. That's how. There's no reason why the female's larger. Actually, maybe should be like that's the kid, something like that. So that's my drawing work. So I'm actually really impressed with what I just drew on the screen for the map of Israel. It's something like that. Maybe it comes out a little less up here and a little bit more down there. Damascus is the capital of Syria. And here I have an arrow pointing to Lebo Hamath. Now, we don't exactly know. Some have Lebo Hamath only about 50 miles north of Damascus, and Hamath being over 130 miles way up on the Euphrates River. So what we have here then is, I think I can come in here to this last map we were at, Kingdom of Saul. Kingdom of Saul. There we go. That'll work. So you'll see here the land of Hamath being way up here in the north, and you'll see Hamath being situated up on the Orontes River, not far from, the color's wrong there, you're not going to see that, not far from the Euphrates River. And so basically, in other words, during the reign of Jeroboam II, the land that Israel is able to recover basically goes all the way up, almost all the way up to the Euphrates River, almost all the way up to the height of Israel's prosperity, the amount of land that they had. But you'll also see that it goes as far south, as far as the Sea of the Arabah, which is the Dead Sea. So really, the northern section that Israel once possessed, Jeroboam restores all this land. He restores a ton of land. And so you're seeing prosperity here. You're also seeing that this was spoken about by Jonah, the son of Amittai. Now, what do we know about Jonah? This is Jonah. This is the Jonah. Now, we don't have this prophecy. We don't see this anywhere in Scripture. We don't have it written down anywhere, except here. We know that he spoke about that God had spoken through Jonah that this land would be recovered. What do we know about Jonah? Anyone else? Anyone new? We have a couple of repeats here tonight. Okay, go ahead. Brittany.
He was God sent him to Nineveh to tell them a prophecy, and he spoke to God, and then God sent a big storm, and he was eaten by fish, and stuck at Nineveh.
He got puked up. He got puked up. So God tells him to go to Nineveh, and he doesn't want to go. I called him, and we're going to eventually go through Jonah again. It's probably been almost 10 years. It's probably been over 10 years since we did Jonah. We'll probably go back through Jonah in the next handful of years. But I called him the prophet who ran from God. Anyone remember? Was anyone here for that series? Brittany, you were here. Maybe a couple of you guys were here. The prophet who ran from God. And that's what he did. And he ends up in the belly of a great sea monster, a great fish, and he gets puked up on the land, and he ultimately goes. But what's interesting is he's told to preach against what did you say? He was preach against what?
Well, I said they gave him a prophecy, but to preach repentance, basically.
And where was he sent? Nineveh, which is the capital of Assyria, not the Syrians to the northeast, but the bigger cat. Remember the big cat? Remember all these little mice, and then the big cat, Assyria? So the capital city of Assyria is Nineveh, and he hates the Assyrians. And from when we looked at, it seemingly hates the Assyrians, based on, if you're reading the book of Jonah, it's hard to walk away and say, this guy really likes the Assyrians. He really wants their good. If you're reading the book of Jonah, by the end of Jonah, you're like, he really doesn't want these guys to get off the hook. He wants these guys to be destroyed. That's clear. Agreed? Pretty clear if you're reading Jonah, especially Jonah chapter 4. But you'll notice here that he was from Gath-Hepher. Now, this is something we covered in our study of Jonah. But just to kind of bring you back here, Gath-Hepher is to the west of the Sea of Galilee. There we go. So if we were to zoom in on, just to kind of like show you what's up. This is Israel, and the Dead Sea is here. Can you just rip that open and be done with it? Rip it open. And then the Sea of Galilee is here. Just rip it open. Just do it. It's going to drive me crazy if you don't. Does that stuff, you guys hear all that stuff too? I can't hear anything else but the little wrapper that someone's trying not to let you hear. I just rip it. And then I won't hear it anymore. If you were to draw a line from the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee over to the Mediterranean Sea and go almost halfway, you find the town of Gath-Hepher. This is where Jonah's from. This is where Jonah's from. Now, the interesting thing about that is, if we're looking at a map of Assyrian campaigns through Israel, and we were going to zoom in on this map and see Shalmaneser's campaign in 841 during Jonah's ministry, not far from Jonah's ministry. If you were looking at that and you were going to see the path that the Assyrians took, you'd see them come down. You'd see them come down this route. And remember, we drew our little line right in there. Right in there is where Jonah's from. So the Assyrians come basically right through where Jonah lives. And these guys, this is only about 15 years before Jonah. They come right down through the land. It might be the way we might think of, or the way we would have thought about the Russians, the Soviets, maybe before the wall fell a little bit. There was a lot of fear of the Soviets and some of that stuff. And now some of that has been renewed a little bit. But, he comes down here in 841, and then in 797, basically follows a pretty similar track. So right around the time of Jonah's ministry, both of these campaigns come within like 10 miles of where Jonah lives. Now, you might see, maybe the Assyrians, they're brutal. They may have killed some of Jonah's friends and family members. They'll take women and children as captives. They'll skin their enemies alive. They'll strip their captives naked and impale their bodies on stakes. So, when you're reading Jonah and you read like Jonah's disdain, his anger towards the Assyrians, there's a little context there to really kind of consider where he's from and when the Assyrians came through. They're a bitter enemy that perhaps did some real harm to people around Jonah or some of his extended family or whatever. I'm sure Jonah was happy to be prophesying that Israel would be gaining land. And I'm sure that when Jonah was told to go to the capital city of the Assyrians and tell them that judgment was coming, obviously he knew how merciful God was, and he was not trying to see these people repent. And this is perhaps why. So just something for you there. Maybe you found value there. But Israel's restoring, Jeroboam's restoring the land, and all that happened because of God's grace to Israel. We see that the Lord saw the affliction of Israel, which was very bitter. He saw the great oppression that came by the hands of the Syrians, their neighbors to the northeast. He delivered them from their enemies. He gave them a temporary reprieve, and he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Joash. So, unfortunately, while the kingdom is expanding politically, and while things are going well politically, things are degrading. They're going the wrong direction spiritually, and they continue to grow further and further away from God, and their ethics continue to be soiled by the Jeroboam cult. They're apostates, and they're going to pay for it soon. And Amos predicts the violent death of this king Jeroboam. And you could read about that in Amos 7, verses 10 through 14 if you want. I'm not going to go there. But he also predicts the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel. So we see the length of Jeroboam's rule, we see the evil of it, we see some of the works of his rule, and then we see the end of his rule in verses 28 and 29. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did and his might, how he fought and how he recovered for Israel Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are they not written in, that is, they were part of the original nation of Israel? Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son became king in his place. And so again, we're seeing this recovery of the kingdom. We're seeing this political expansion, but we're seeing this nation growing further and further away from the Lord and growing closer and closer to their own destruction and closer to exile. He dies in 753. His son Zechariah takes over. That will be the fourth son of Jehu to rule. And we'll see his short rule and several others. But what we're going to see here is major political turmoil coming up. So for now, we see a political advance, a continued spiritual decline. And that continued spiritual decline results in a political decline. That's what we're going to see. And it kind of tells me that physical prosperity is not always connected to spiritual prosperity. Their advancement in this world is not the same as godliness. There are people who do really well in this world. There are people who make a lot of money in this world and accumulate a lot of stuff. That doesn't mean that they're advancing spiritually. I know some people like to make that connection. Some people like to say, look how God blessed me. I have this, and I have this, and I have that. Those things may not be a blessing, especially if it's like money and stuff. They may actually be a curse. Jeroboam helped advance the cause politically. He restored the borders that were lost a long time earlier. He brought prosperity to a nation that had been struggling, but he did not advance the cause spiritually. He made things worse. He continued bringing them further and further away from the Lord. He does it for so long, for 41 years, that by the end of his reign, they've pretty much hit the point of no return. And Israel will fall because of their idolatry and because of their evil ways. Because what they really need is not the political advancement that Jeroboam can bring them. Damascus, Hamath, all the way down to the Sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea. Land. They don't need land. They need a king from the tribe of David. They need the Messiah. That's what they need. When I look at this account as the warning that it is and how it contributes to Israel's destruction, I can only consider how it applies to our own situation as a nation and individually. And I can't help but think about how the parallels between this and the United States today. We're one of the richest nations. We had been one of the richest nations. I guess we still are. We're still one of the richest nations in the world. Biden's economy has not helped the cause, unfortunately. And we were just talking about this at breakfast. Before Biden, we were paying $5 for breakfast. Now we're paying $8 for breakfast. I remember my groceries were probably 50% of what they are today, because the left's economic policies are horrible, absolutely terrible. Just one example of it is let's raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It's like, oh, that sounds great. That sounds great until, all these people who worked so hard to get to $15 and $20 an hour their whole lives, now they're making minimum wage. It just doesn't even, it's a foolish way of thinking that doesn't take into account the whole picture, and it doesn't foresee the future. You have just taken all the dollars that these people have and minimized its value. So in the end, it doesn't change the situation. It just makes the situation worse for everyone else. And that living wage of $15 an hour, it's not living. It's not living, and you just have to keep upping it. And therefore, the value of the dollar keeps decreasing, and it's just foolish. It's just a complete foolish policy, but that's the way the left thinks, because they don't know the first thing about managing money or business or ethics or anything like that. They've had some pretty terrible financial policies. But as bad as its financial policies are, its spiritual policies had been far worse. Far worse. And so we can't even say that we've seen advances politically. In the last several years, well, all we've seen is decline politically, but we've also seen a spiritual decline here. The nation is clearly headed in the wrong direction spiritually. We continue, look, we got a reprieve. You look at the red and the blue in the map of this election, and it looked a whole lot better. Better coverage than Verizon. It's like a whole bunch of, the people spoke. But even those people who voted red, they might have just voted red because of money. They might as well, it's a money thing, it's a border thing. And though some of those things are important, they're not the real issues. They're secondary issues. The real issues are the ethics of the nation. And when you look at the ethics of the nation, we continue as a nation towards leftist theology, immoral thinking and practices, things like transgenderism and a transgender ideology and homosexuality and abortion and all this stuff. I mean, I just saw yesterday, I was on a local Facebook group trying to help someone figure something out. He was like, hey, post a picture of this guy and maybe this group can help you identify who he was. And I'm telling them what's on the page. Oh yeah, this guy was lost his dog. This guy, 2 hours later they found the dog. And you post this stuff out in the community, it'll help you figure out what's going on here. And the next thing I see is, drag me out to something. I don't remember what it was called. And it was an invitation to a drag show. And that's just where we are. That's where we are. We have people in Stroudsburg during a gay pride parade. You have a bunch of guys dressed like women reading story time to children. This is where we're going as a nation. We've become one of the vilest cultures in the world. We really have. It'll be no wonder if or when the nation falls. But you can see a scenario like this happening on a personal level where people will do everything they can to advance in this world, but all the while they're advancing personally, they're declining spiritually. And sometimes that happens. People will chase after the mighty dollar. Get that green, get that bread. And as they chase after the money and they follow the money and they make those personal advances, sometimes they don't tend to their spiritual walks. And when that happens, trouble's on the horizon. And the judgment of God is near. And so you need to prosper spiritually. Spiritually. Spiritual prosperity is what matters more than any type of political or personal prosperity, any type of worldly prosperity. You need to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. What the kingdom of Israel needed was the Messiah, and it's the same thing that you need today. It's the same. You have the same need. You need to seek the King, the Messiah. You need to make sure that you're walking with him. And when you do that, physical and earthly prosperity will take its proper place. True success is not determined by what you can gain in this world, or how you can advance in this world, or how we advance politically. It's seen in what we gain in eternity, what we are in eternity, and where we stand with God. So that's everything I have for tonight. Turn to 386. Okay, 387. 387. And that was the coaches don't like when Peyton Manning would audible.